More cracks are emerging in the path to recovery for China's economy as it logs one of its slowest growth rates in more than 3 decades. Asia's largest economy also saw another year of population decline, despite government efforts to boost a flagging birth rate and to stave off a demographic crisis. CNA's Olivia Xiong with this report.
China's GDP grew by 5.2% last year, surpassing the target set for around 5% growth in early 2023, a goal that had been described as modest then, coming off a low base in the previous year, as COVID lockdowns and travel restrictions affected economic activity. But China's economy has not recovered as quickly as some had expected and is likely to continue to face challenges through the rest of the year, with reports suggesting that China is likely to maintain its economic growth target at around 5% for 2024. All eyes will be on how policymakers will act. The biggest drag has been China's troubled property sector, which traditionally makes up about a quarter of its GDP. December new home prices fell at the fastest rate since 2015. Weak domestic demand is another issue, with retail sales growing by 7.4% in December, down from 10.1% the month before. People holding back spending as unemployment, especially among the youth, has been high. The overall unemployment figure inching up slightly to 5.1% in December.
这个23年呢，应该来讲这个世界经济是低迷，国际格局呢在复杂演变，地缘政治冲突频发。 我们面临的外部环境的复杂性、严峻性、不确定性上升，国内的周期性、结构性矛盾也比较多，自然灾害也频发。
There are also longer-term challenges. China announced that its population has shrunk for a second straight year, falling by 2.08 million out of its 1.41 billion population in 2023. This comes amid a record low birth rate and a wave of COVID-19 deaths after strict lockdowns ended.
展望2024年，我们也要看到当前外部环境依然复杂严峻。 国内有效需求不足，部分行业产能过剩，社会预期偏弱风险隐患依然较多推动我国经济进一步回升向好，还要克服一些困难和挑战。
It's clear the economy has been on the mind of China's leadership. Premier Li Qiang on a charm offensive in Davos, telling leaders at the World Economic Forum that China is open for business, pledging to create a more favorable environment for the world. This also amid an outflow of foreign capital and as some firms look to diversify their supply chains away from China. Olivia Xiong, CNA, Beijing.
And CNA's Minmin joins us live from Shanghai. Minmin, China's population not just falling for a second year, but falling at a steeper rate, compounding concerns about, as we've heard all these months, economic growth. What's being done in terms of policy to address these immediate concerns?
Yes, the numbers are indeed quite staggering if you look at it. We're looking at a decline of over 2 million people last year. That's compared to just 850,000 in 2022. And a big reason is that death rate had hit a record high since 1974 during the Cultural Revolution. And that's because last year, if you remember, China shifted very abruptly away from zero COVID. That unleashed a dramatic surge in COVID cases across the country, leading to the deaths of many elderlies with underlying diseases. And it's a double whammy when you have record low birth rates that is inching closer to the birth rate of Japan in 2022. But one reason for optimism, though, the National Bureau of Statistics say that this means more people are leaving the workforce this year through retirement, and that will create more space to absorb the many young people who are looking for jobs. Now, we know that Beijing has shown that they are not very willing to overstimulate the economy for short-term growth, but we can't decouple the rate of China's demographic decline with the state of its economy. We've heard from Olivia earlier that the economy isn't doing so well. We've seen wages for white-collar workers falling for many people during the pandemic, and an ongoing property crisis, and when you have most people's life savings locked up in property that they feel will not increase in value in the future, then it's not surprising that many young people are not willing to shoulder the additional pressure of raising a family when they already have to bear the burden of caring for their elderly parents alone, because remember, many of them are single child themselves.
Minmin, of course, growth is just one thing, but China, not least the late Premier Li Keqiang, they've always stressed growth is secondary to employment. So talking about youth employment, figures for youth employment, they're resuming NBS, resuming release of those figures after 5 months of not releasing those figures. And we're seeing the youth jobless rate improving in December after hitting record highs earlier last year. What are economists saying about this particular issue?
So China had stopped publishing the youth unemployment data after it had risen for 6 consecutive months, reaching a high in June. Today, the National Bureau of Statistics explained that the new figures have excluded, they said that they needed to revise the methodology for collection of data, and they said today's figures excluded those students who are still in school. They say that is to sieve out those students who are looking for part-time job from those students who are looking for full-time job after graduation. And in another change, they also announced that they are now releasing youth unemployment rates for those aged 25 to 29 instead of lumping this group together with all the other adults. The reason for this, they said, is because many young people are choosing to stay in school longer and are entering the workforce later. So we've seen youth unemployment rates drop from a high of over 20% in June to just under 15% in December. But some analysts say we can't conclude that that's a major improvement because we're not comparing like for like. And they say a reason that many people are studying longer in school, it could be precisely because of the dire job market. What's clear, though, is there is immense pressure for China to create more jobs for young graduates because there's another record batch of young graduates entering the workforce this year, 11.79 million entering the workforce in the summer.
Oh, thanks. CNA's Minmin reporting live just there from Shanghai.